I was originally intending to make a single wooden pickup ring for my Yamaha RGZ Standard, because it's all wood and metal apart from one plastic pickup ring. And I had this nice piece of mahogany in the garage. But then I decided, why not make an entire custom neck-through guitar, because that's the obvious next step for somebody with no woodworking experience and not many tools. So this was originally an offcut bought from the lumber mills, and it's actually very resonant. We were originally going to repair a door with it, but in the end we replaced the entire door. So it's just been sitting in the garage for years. And then I looked at it the other day and I thought that would make quite a nice neck. And then, but I have no experience of making guitars, no woodworking experience, and making the neck pocket and the neck heel and getting everything just right is very hard to do. So I thought, let's not do that. But then I measured it and I realized it's actually long enough to do a full neck through guitar. And so I went a little bit mad, and now I'm building this. I have no woodworking experience, I don't have many tools, I have no idea what I'm doing, but how hard can it be? So I bought a maple plank that's been cut to exactly the same thickness as the mahogany to make up the wings. I've cut that in two. Nice bit of grain, nice bit of figuring. Also a little bit of tear out, unfortunately, which they missed when they were planing it, but what can you do? And this is quite nicely resonant as well. Actually, I said that, that's not resonating at all. Anyway. Does this one resonate? Anyway. So I bought a ready-made fretboard, because making the fretboard is the really difficult bit. It's got a 16-inch radius, 24 frets, nice bit of maple. Now, because the mahogany is completely flat, I needed to shim the fretboard in order to get the correct string clearance at the bridge. So I found somewhere online selling this 2.5mm thick purpleheart board, which I'm going to attach onto the mahogany there to put the fretboard on, which will then give me just the perfect string clearance at the bridge. So let's see how this goes. So the first thing to do is attach the purpleheart shim onto the mahogany. So I've bought a Stratocaster template. Now the mahogany isn't quite long enough to do the standard headstock, but it's long enough to do a 4x2, so that would be a nice Music Man style thing. So I've measured it all out, and the purpleheart is going to sit on just there. So we're going to glue that on next. Once we've done that, we're going to route the truss rod channel, and then once we've done that, we're then going to cut the neck shape into the back of the neck using the jigsaw table I've built. We'll see how well that works, but it seems to be cutting quite well. So I've now glued the purpleheart onto the mahogany using a lot of clamps. You can never have too many clamps, as they say. And yeah, I'm going to leave that for 24 hours to set up. I've wiped away the excess, and that should be good. It's now the next day, so I'll now remove the clamps and see what's happened. And I've glued the clamping cord to it. Of course I have. Great. Right, where's the big hammer? There we go. Right, that looks quite good. Yep, I'm happy with that. Right, so the next thing to do is to route the truss rod cavity. Okay. Interestingly, having glued on the purpleheart, which is very hard, it's changed the note of the mahogany. It's higher pitched than it was. Still nicely resonant, but higher pitched. So I bought a router on eBay, a nice Makita, to route the truss rod channel, and it comes with the guide. So this runs along the edge of the workpiece, and I've seen people do this and they've just run it along no problem. I've also seen people on YouTube use this, and then as they move it along it slips and all of a sudden your truss rod channel's all over the place. So in order to fix this, I'm going to put a piece of wood on this side so that it can only move in one plane. Now the problem with this is there's a bit of a lip on either end of these, so the wood would catch on that and it wouldn't slice smoothly. So what I've done is cut a bit of plywood that's the same thickness and use the super glue and masking tape trick to stick them to the back of here. So I've got a nice straight edge to run along on both sides, so that there's no chance for the router to router. So there's no chance for the router. I keep getting confused. So there's no chance for the router to move, and we should get a nice straight cut with no problems. This is my routing rig. So I have the wood clamped on the workbench using these clamps, which also double as end stops. I have the guide clamped between this piece of MDF and the workpiece so that the router can only move in one plane. And then it's just a question of doing a couple of passes, and that should be it. Annoyingly, the vacuum cleaner attachment on the router is not the right size for my vacuum cleaner, so I've improvised a conduit, and hopefully that's going to hold up. So now I've routed out the truss rod channel. Now the truss rod fits in very nicely. It's nicely flush there, and the next job is to chisel out the ends to accept the adjuster bolt on the end and make it square so we're not round there. It's looking good. I had to buy some chisels to finish cutting out the truss rod channel. It's not as neat as I'd hoped, but for a first go I'm happy with that. Next thing to do is hog out the material on the back of the neck. The next stage is to cut the excess material off the back of the neck. The easiest way to do this, of course, is with a bandsaw, but I don't have a bandsaw and the jigsaw isn't really up to the task. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the router to hog out most, if not all, of the material, and get very close to the thickness of the neck. And then once I've done that inside this boundary, I'm then going to use the jigsaw to then cut off the excess on either side, as that should be fairly straightforward. So I've now taken most of the wood off the back of the neck, leaving the rails for the router to run on. And now the final cut will be taking it down to the thickness of the template. And yeah, at the moment that's worked very nicely. So having taken 15mm out of the back of this, it's changed the note again. Still nicely resonant. It's looking promising. So now I've routed the back of the neck down to the correct thickness, which is just a shade over 18mm. Yep, that's looking good. And I use the ball nose bit in my router to do a nice curve at the end here. You can see that. So the next stage is now to trim this down to width on the jigsaw. It's looking good. This is my rig for taking the headstock thickness down to where it needs to be. So I've clamped it to the workbench. I've got the maple I'm using for the wings on either side, plus the template I'm using to give me a flat surface. And I've mounted the router onto a board to then move across as a router sled onto that. And it's cutting quite nicely. So I need to do another cut to take that down to the correct depth, and then we'll be there.